Jim. Next, I'd like to welcome Kaitlin Love, Director of Ipsos, and lead on our work together to present on the research and its findings.
Hi everyone. Hello there. Okay, so I'm going to present the findings. My name is Kaitlin Love. I work for Ipsos. Ipsos is a global research and advisory company. And we've been working with WADA over the past, a little over a year actually, to do a study on the empowering effects that water can have on women. So to start with some background, our question was, can water interventions empower women? We know that water and sanitation interventions have multiple direct impacts on the communities. We also know that women are frequently the disproportionate beneficiaries of those impacts because in most cases they're the ones that bear the burden of water collection. They're safer, they save time, they're healthier, but what this study was really about was, do they also experience indirect benefits from water interventions? Things like being able to generate income, increasing their decision-making abilities, or participating more in the community. So to look at that more, we had three essential research questions. The first is, what are the impacts of water interventions specifically on women and girls? Those are our women and water impacts. The second is, what are the indirect impacts or the ripple effects of water interventions for women and girls? And the third is, combining those two, does that lead to empowerment of women and girls? And then of course, I think particularly relevant for this audience, how can that knowledge be used in program design to create more of an enabling environment for women and girls in the context of water interventions? So what you're seeing here is a vastly, vastly oversimplified version of our theory of change. In reality, it's in Excel and it's multiple pages long. But as you can see on the left, we have a pretty typical theory of change or log frame. We're looking at wash and water access programs. They're creating water points, providing sustainable agricultural inputs, conducting trainings. And all of those things happen to people who are using the water points, the committees that have been trained are doing what they're supposed to do, things like that. That's kind of where most traditional theories of change end. Where we moved from there was looking at thematic pathways. And those pathways were really the bridge from looking at the women and water direct impacts to ultimate empowerment. And I'm going to go into these pathways a little bit more. They're also, all of this is in this pretty little handout that some of you have. It's also on the table over there. So when we got to the pathways, we were faced with a really big question, and that is, what is women's empowerment? And we looked around and we tried to see what was out there, and what we found was really things were either too context specific or they were too broad and really made it difficult to measure. And so we developed this, which is our framework for measuring women's empowerment. And what was really important to us was to develop something that was non-linear and multidimensional to really capture the fact that empowerment doesn't really happen one thing to the next to empowerment. It's a complex and multifaceted process. And so we look at empowerment at three levels: individual, household, and community, but we also look in three dimensions. So the first one, her objective reality, is what does the woman have access to? What's her education like? What types of rights does she have? What's her role in her household and her community? The second one, her self-perception, is really about her confidence. How does she feel about her opinions? Are they respected? How do people treat her? Things like that. And then the last one is the cultural norms of her community. And that's looking more broadly. So how are women in general treated in this community? What are their roles? What are the expectations of them? After we got to this point, we gathered evidence for our hypothesis. And we did that by going out and doing deep dive case studies and data collection in three different projects. The first one, which we'll hear much more about today because Gretchen is here, is Global Grassroots, which was an intervention in Rwanda that brought municipal piped water access as well as conducted a women's leadership program. The second one is Water for a Generation in Swaziland, which brought water to rural communities there. And the third is improving health and livelihoods in rural communities in the very conservative parts of northern Nigeria. Okay, so now we get to the fun part. I'm going to go through selected pathways because I only have 10 minutes and it's a lot of information. There's, again, more information here. I'm happy to answer questions about the other ones, but I really focused here on the pathways that had less evidence for them, so where we thought we could add the most to the information that's out there. The first one is time savings. So the logic here is when a water source is placed thoughtfully within a community, those that are responsible for water collection, who are most often women, save time. And what we saw in our study is that over 3/4 of women save time, over half of women save 30 minutes or more. And that time was spent on a variety of things, but the two that have potential empowering effects are income generation, which was about 40% of women spent their saved time on that, and about 20% of women used their saved time to participate in community groups. These women that saved time, they were more likely to be active in the community, they were more likely to participate in income generating activities, they were more likely to report an increase in income, and they were more likely to have self-efficacy and self-confidence scores. So as researchers, this is where we started to get really excited, because the things that we had hypothesized, we started seeing coming back to us in the data and in testing the statistical relationships. The next pathway is income. The theory here is that some women use saved time to generate income, which can give them a larger and more empowered role in their household and in their community. So for this one, we looked at that 40% of women that use their saved time on income generation. Almost all of those women earned more income as a result of that. Many of them, over 80%, also expanded their income generating activities. And as you can see along the bottom, the increase in income generated by female household members increased in all countries. However, it was most pronounced in Rwanda. Women that earned income from a new source were more likely to decide how that income was allocated. They were more likely to maintain joint control over income, and they were more likely to report a financial account, a new financial account, in a female household member's name. So again, our hypotheses about empowerment here, we're seeing them come through. The next pathway is safety and security. So thoughtfully placed water sources can reduce safety and harassment issues and therefore increase freedom of movement and community engagement for women and girls. What we saw here is that about 1/3 of women reported a decrease in safety or harassment issues while collecting water. The graph on the bottom is looking at women who said they never experienced harassment while collecting water, and you can see that across all countries it increased. In Rwanda, it more than doubled, which I think has a bit to do with the nature of the intervention, which Gretchen will speak about. But in all cases, we saw this go up. And those women that reported that decrease in safety and harassment, they were more likely to be active in the community. They were more likely to report an increase in respect for women, both in the household and in the community. And they were more likely to have high self-efficacy. Our next pathway is leadership and skills. So when incorporated into water-related trainings, women become more active in the community and in the household in terms of decision-making, expressing their opinions, feeling respect, things like that. As a result of the water projects, more women were active in communities. So what you can see here is that 90% of women in Rwanda said that they were, or other women in their community, were more active community members. And again, the graph on the right is they were more active in leadership positions. So we're seeing here that this is happening as a result of the water interventions. 1/4 of women that participated in this study received training of any type. The women that received training were more likely to be more active in the community. They were more likely to participate in household decision making, and they were more likely to report an increase for household and community respect for women. So our last pathway is shifting roles and norms. The theory here is that all of these pathways and all of the impacts that they have kind of come together, and the ultimate outcome is that the ultimate outcome of the pathways to empowerment is a shift in culture. And what we saw is that women reported increased household and community respect. They're saying that men have a lot more respect for them at both the household and the community level, and 37% said that they have taken on a new household decision-making responsibility, either jointly or alone. And this quote is from a community leader in Rwanda, and I'm going to take the time to read it because I think it's very demonstrative of the type of impacts we're trying to get at. Things have changed. Women work not only in their homes, but now, because the burden of water collection is less, they have saved time, so they're able to work outside their homes. They engage in activities that used to be only for men. These activities are no longer seen as taboo for women to do. Women are no longer marginalized. They are becoming confident, they are eager to participate in community meetings, and they look forward to having their voice heard. The community is no longer held up by the thought that women are incapable. So in summary, what we really believe is that this study laid the groundwork for understanding the linkages between WASH, water, women, and empowerment. However, the strength of these linkages may depend on what is included in the intervention, and it may also depend on the cultural context, which is where we saw some differences between the countries. More work needs to be done to tie the outcome variables together so we can better understand which variables are driving which and gather more evidence for the role of water in women's empowerment. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. And we're actually going to have Kate put on her next hat, which is moderator of our first panel, focused on the role of research and evaluation in advancing gender equality, particularly in the water sector. So if I could have the first group of panelists, please join us.
Okay. Anyone here? Okay. Thank you, Tori, and thank you, everyone, again. So what we'll do is I'll introduce the panelists. I'm going to ask everybody the same question. We're going to try and cram as much into the time that we have allocated as we can. And at the end of the session, the very end of this session, there'll be time to ask questions about everything that you've seen today. So if you have a question, please hold on to it. We're looking forward to it at the end. So I'll start from my left. Ellen Pfeiffer is a researcher at the IHE Delft Institute for Water Education. She focuses on citizen science, and she's currently conducting work in women's empowerment in rural Africa. Next to her, Rolf Laujudek. Is that okay? He is the Executive Director of Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, which is the UN body that's fully dedicated to sanitation and hygiene. Next to Rolf is Meghann. Meghann is actually my colleague at Ipsos. She has 15 years of experience in research and evaluation, and she focuses on impact evaluation in agriculture, enterprise, and women's empowerment. And next to Meghann, we have Jennifer Sarah. She's the global director of the water practice at the World Bank and has 30 years of experience working on global water issues. So thank you guys all for being here and for participating today. So my first question, and we'll just start from my left and go that way, if that's okay with you guys. I'm sorry you have to go first. My first question is just to introduce your gender equality research and speak a little bit to the relevance of your research in the broader development and water sector. So what are you doing at the intersection of gender and water?
Thank you very much. The projects that we are doing focus on co-designing citizen observatories with rural communities in one project, and in another project looking specifically into innovative approaches and to increase or to promote women as leaders and entrepreneurs and sustainable change agents. But they're also with a question if monitoring and data collection done by communities, by citizens, can be a tool for empowerment. Now, how does that relate to the wider role of research for empowerment processes? I think to me there are three kind of core aspects that are relevant here. One is in your interaction you showed very much that a lot of what we do when it comes to empowerment is very complex. And I think it's part of our role as researchers to also remind agencies that it's good to simplify things, but not too much. It's very kind of tempting and seductive to look at the results of research like yours and say, okay, water access equals empowerment. But empowerment is something that cannot be given. Agency is something that happens in people's heads. So you cannot give empowerment. And if you try to kind of jump the many pages of the Excel sheet too fast, you just end with a woman next to a pipe, but really nothing might have changed. You need all the many steps in between. Based on our research, one of the steps how you can, I think, overcome this or counteract this is to really question how we involve communities and women and youth into implementing the results of your studies. Are we taking our best practice and say, here's what you need to do, and then we make women and communities the subject of our development vision? Or do we actually have processes where we start the conversation on a blank page and say, okay, let's really understand what is your situation, and I can share what we know about the situation, but we need to have a conversation where I offer you insights and choices, and I also need to learn more about you, and then together we can see how this really fits together in your context. And then maybe just very quickly as the last part is, I think we also need to go back then to sponsors and donors and funders and say, yes, we have these studies that show you promising results and KPIs, but you need to give us and leave us some space for open-ended conversations with communities. Otherwise, you lock us into something that might undermine the results you really want.
Good. Thank you very much, Kaitlin. Yes, the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, we run the Global Sanitation Fund with an achievement of about 5 million people in open defecation-free communities last year. Another big part of our program is a menstrual hygiene management program. And I want to talk mostly about the last part. That's what Tori asked me to join. We do research ourselves. We commission research. So we work with researchers, Columbia University, Emory, but also with our partners, WaterAid and UNICEF. You know, if I can focus on some of the MHM findings throughout the world, some of things that we did, because it is MHM. We come to realize is actually about empowerment, or worse, disempowerment. There's so many taboos. There's so many harmful practices around MHM. Most of you are familiar with the charities, the huts in Nepal, where women and girls are banished for a week every month to sit. I just learned that actually for 5 days they're allowed to eat. They're allowed to drink. They're allowed to eat. There's all these beliefs about harmful practices, about touching certain foods and it goes sour, the milk goes sour, or the buffalo gets sick. There are harmful practices in northern Pakistan and Afghanistan where girls are not allowed to bathe for the 7 days during their menstruation, not allowed to bath, not allowed to clean themselves in the genital areas because of fear or infertility. So a lot of the MHM research has focused on those knowledge, attitudes, practices, and beliefs around it. Because if you want to do interventions to actually tackle this, that's where you start. What else? Yes, not attend, of course, some religious ceremonies because women are deemed impure. And here I want to make a sidestep to the Gloria Steinem article, "If Men Could Menstruate." I don't know if you know it, from 1978. Google it, "If Men Could Menstruate." It's brilliant. And if men could menstruate, women would still be impure. You know why? Because men would say, we shared our impurity every month. But women, they keep it inside. They don't have an outlet to share. So the women, ooh, they're impure. But we are the purest. So it is an empowerment. It is an empowerment issue. There's a lot of issues around menstruation. And if you see now, this is some areas of research that we've been discussing with Columbia University to look into. What is the empowerment effect of informing a young girl that menstruation is coming? We know in some cultures 50% of the girls have no clue. We men always assume, the mothers will just inform the girls and prepare them for it or whatever. No, 50% in various cultures have no clue that menstruation is coming. And you can only imagine what that does to an 11 or 12-year-old girl. Right from that moment, the disempowerment starts. And then it's all shrouded in taboo and stigma, and you can't do that, you can't play with boys anymore. Why not? Well, that's why not. So UNFPA, the Population Fund, has realized this as well. And they're making now the link with SRHR, with sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I think some new research should be seen in what is the empowering effect of informing young girls, timely informing young girls what happens to their bodies. because it's a wonderful entry point for a lifelong of emotional, physical, and potentially sexual or reproductive health. The other area is who is sustaining those taboos? Who is sustaining those harmful practices? If we look at female genital mutilation, the research there shows it's actually largely it's mothers and grandmothers who sustain it. It's not the man asking it. It is the woman doing this to their sister. So on MHM, there's another area that we would like to look into, because again, if you want to do interventions, you need to know where you need to start. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kate. So I worked with Kate and Tori on this research, so I'm going to go back to talking about this research for a minute. We're so pleased with what we were able to achieve with this. I think it's added some really strong evidence to the hypothesis that water programs can have an empowering effect on women, and in areas that haven't previously been investigated in depth. So I think, though, rather than saying more about the findings, I'll just touch a little on the next steps and what we're going to be doing in the coming months with this research. So I think the first next step is to look at the same connections that we found in this study, but to implement some more rigorous research methodologies. So this study was a one-time point, in-depth case study in each of the 3 projects, along with desk research and assessments. What we would like to do now is do some longitudinal impact studies to really get into some of these findings in a lot more detail, using our current hypothesis and theory of change. I think we also need to, and this goes back to some of what you were saying, we need to look at and develop our analytical processes to really try to understand the links between the various dimensions of empowerment. It's not simple or linear. We need to understand how all of these variables are interacting with each other. And then I think finally, what we need to do at this stage is to try to figure out how to make this a workable tool for practitioners. So how can we take what we've learned and turn it into something that they can use to figure out what direction they want to take their programs in.
Well, thank you. It's really great to be here, and I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. And the reason I was late is on my way up, I ran into Letitia Ben, who hired me, since you said 30 years ago. 30 years ago, and she was standing there with 4 young women, 4 young engineers who were just starting their career. And so I had to go give her a hug. And then I said, Letitia, do you know that when I first joined, within a week, you came to my desk and you put this big blue folder on my desk that was called WID. Does anybody remember WID? It was Woman in Development, right? And it was like, and I'm so happy because there's a second woman in our unit and you can now take charge of this, right? So anyway, it's really nice to see that we're talking about gender equality, not just women in development, and that we have come a long way and there's a long way to go. At the World Bank, we are deeply convinced of the role of women and development, but not just because we know that women as a contributor and catalyzer of economic growth, but also we believe of gender equality as a human right. And I think that's fundamental. And we have a new strategy, it's not that new anymore, but 2016 to 2023, which is shifting us from just mainstreaming gender and counting how many projects have women as beneficiaries as opposed to men. That's what we used to do, to really strategically, when we develop an intervention, to do some analytical work up front and to target the approach that identifies what the gender gaps are and then how do you build closing the gender gaps into our operations. It's really challenging for us, and we call this the gender tab, and we've been struggling for the last 2 years because we have a group that monitors this and they keep on pushing our projects back and saying, you're not really doing the analytical work up front to understand the gender gap, because we just say, well, if we have enough female beneficiaries in the projects, then they're going to save their time, or the members of the water committee, that's enough, and they're saying no. And so now we're starting to get into new areas, very, very interesting, about women in utilities, women in decision-making in ministries, women in water resource management, which is really a field that, we talk about water supply and sanitation, but less of. I wanted to share with you, we've done lots and lots of analytical work, 30 pieces is what they told me over the last 10 years. It's nice to do all this analytical work, it's all online, we have to share, but then how do you move it to action? But I did want to share with you just two experiences, because I think it's a really important thing. How do you provide the evidence? And when you put evidence there, you can make policy decisions because there is hard evidence on the table. So let me just share two, because I don't have much time. One of them is in Latin America. There's a system called CSR, which in 11 countries is monitoring these operation, maintenance, and sustainability of water and sanitation systems in rural areas. So there's 22 million people that are being tracked. And what's interesting there is that they've looked at the sustainability of water systems, and 88% of them, not surprising, are rating A to D, A is good. If they have women on the committee, it dramatically rises. The number of women on the water board or on the water committee. So this is nice evidence. Doesn't surprise a lot of us, but it's nice to be able to put it up on the table. But the one I really, really like, which I didn't even know we were doing as the World Bank, is we have a group called the Women, Business, and the Law. And it's a World Bank Group project that looks at laws around the world. And it's a data set that looks at how laws and regulations restrict women's economic opportunities. And I didn't even know they looked at water. And one thing, they did say globally, over 2.7 billion women are legally restricted from having the same choice in jobs as men. That's across all sectors. 2.7 billion women are legally not allowed to have the same choice of jobs. But what I was really intrigued is there was an annex about water, and I picked a few of them out because I hadn't even heard about this research before. In Azerbaijan, women cannot work as water pipe workers. This is a law. In China, women are not allowed to perform cold water operations during their menstrual period. What's also interesting is that a lot of these laws are obviously quite old, because women cannot be divers or plumbers. And this is in Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova. So you can already see that this is a law that's been sitting on the books forever, that hasn't been changed. And the last example I want to give, and I'll stop there, which is that women are prohibited from working underwater. I don't know how that came out. But what's bizarre here, what's really, really bizarre here is the group of countries that have this law include Bangladesh, Turkey, Sudan, South Sudan, and Vietnam. So anyway, I just wanted to put that on the table because I find this fascinating. So
thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys all so much. I'm going to, for the next question, which I think we have to keep it to like, oh, okay, so we're not getting a next question?
Maybe 1 or 2 words on the next question.
Okay. Okay. Everyone gets to share one sentence.
That was really close.
Let's make it count.
One sentence on a lesson they've learned about the intersection of women and water, or the intersection of gender and water.
Don't you start somewhere else this time?
Okay, stop Columbia.
I mean, start at home in your own offices and involve women and men and make a gender equality at all levels.
Women's empowerment is very complex. We need to embrace the complexity. To do so is very challenging, but we need to embrace it. We can't make it simple.
I want to actually talk to the men. Women rule the world, really. I mean, all that's needed from us is only this, a little cup like that to get to 7 billion people. So we need to pay more attention.
Well, maybe as a direct lesson learned is that the water community has long been very engineering dominated, and from this comes this insight that what gets measured gets managed. But a lot of female interests happen in the orphan spaces that are actually not measured and not managed, and sometimes or very often, they fall victim to well-intended measures, and it's not even noticed.
Thank you all for being here. Yeah, that's it.